Hey guys, Larry here for Pro Slam World Podcast, which you've downloaded. You're going to listen to in a moment. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say to go check out Pro Slam World on YouTube. You can find it at, shockingly, Pro Slam World. All one word. You'll find my podcast on there every week. A lot of cool videos on there, wrestling videos, and new content going up shortly. So check it out. YouTube Pro Slam World on YouTube. And with that, let's get into the show.
When everything is broken and nothing's going right, this wall's been building in your...
And another episode. We're up to 3. Welcome to the Pro Slam World Podcast with your host, Larry Mormon, bringing you everything professional wrestling, not just the WWE, but we'll talk indies, we'll talk Japan, we'll talk Mexico, we'll talk everywhere and everything. And this week I got some my opinions I'd like to discuss because of a show that I saw this past weekend, actually, last weekend, and depending on when you heard this, from Evolve. But before we get into that, let's kick things off first, because coming up on Sunday, April 30th, we have the Raw exclusive Payback pay-per-view. As much as it's a Raw exclusive, it will have a couple of SmackDown guys, a couple of SmackDown matches, if you will. I'll get into that in a few moments, and I feel like some of these matches are a direct result of what I talked about last week with part-time champions. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Just real fast to go through it, let's get right into it. On the preview show, on the kickoff show, big tag team match, Enzo Amore and Big Cass will be taking on Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson. Also on the Payback kickoff show, Miz TV, hosted by The Miz and his lovely, lovely wife, Maurice. Special guest, Finn Balor. So Balor still with no pay-per-view match. Still, he returned the night after Raw. And there's been one pay-per-view, so, you know, what could I say? But not on the card. I mean, I don't know, maybe they'll feud him with The Miz? Who knows? I don't know. The Miz has really been coming up as of late. The Miz has been really showing his chops. What other cliches can I think of? I've always been a fan of The Miz, and you'll hear me say that often on this show, because watching him in the very beginning, and we're talking like real world, what was it? Back to New York? Was it the 20th anniversary or the 10th anniversary? No, it couldn't be the 20th. Probably the 10th anniversary. One of them. Whichever one the second New York Real World was, that's the one that The Miz was on. And he was just like any other MTVer being on the Real World, but he had that persona. The Miz started on the Real World and his love of wrestling, and then he got into the business the old-fashioned way. He started off training locally. He went to the Indies. He had a rough road in the WWE. Let's not forget how he kept flubbing up the number to call during the Divas contest. The backlash, no pun intended, for the next pay-per-view that Miz had gotten a lot from the fans in the beginning. Then they grew on him, then they grew off him, then they're back on him. But to see him progress from just a fan and a dream on the Real World to main eventing WrestleMania 27 from the Georgia Dome. I was there, baby. Against John Cena, main event, Miz was going in as WWE champion, and Miz came out WWE champion. That, in my opinion, is living the dream, and he did it. And I was probably one of 4 or 5 people who was excited to see the Miz actually win and retain the title at Mania 27. So I'd love to see him win another title run. What are you kidding me? I would love to see him as Universal Champion, but we'll talk about the Universal title in a little bit. But that's the kickoff, and then getting onto the main pay-per-view, let's run it down. WWE Cruiserweight action as a rematch, hence the term Payback. So we got a few rematches from WrestleMania. Neville will defend the Cruiserweight Championship against Austin Aries. On the Raw Women's Championship side, Bayley will defend against newly acquired and my favorite superstar in the women's division between Raw and SmackDown, and even throw NXT in there. Bayley will defend against 5 Feet of Fury, Little Miss Bliss, that's right, Alexa Bliss. The Raw Tag Team titles will be defended as the Hardy Boys continue their return on Raw when they go one-on-one, I guess 2-on-2, against Sheamus and Cesaro. Cesaro and Sheamus will look to regain the Red Brand Tag Team Championship. Now, in one of two matches that has impact for both Raw and SmackDown, United States Champion Kevin Owens, the face of the United States, even though he's from Maribel, Quebec, Canada. Kevin Owens will defend the United States Championship against Chris Jericho. Now, Jericho is on Raw. Kevin Owens and the United States Championship are on SmackDown. Because of that, the United States Championship is now property of SmackDown, which means if the Ayatollah of Rock and Rolla, if Y2J Chris Jericho can walk out of Payback, if he can walk out of San Jose, the United States Champion, then Raw will lose Chris Jericho as he will then move to SmackDown Live. Seth Rollins finally will get his hands on Samoa Joe. That feud has been boiling since, right after the day after the Royal Rumble, especially when Samoa Joe tweaked Rollins' knee again. That led to a great match, one of the best matches of the evening at WrestleMania, Rollins and Triple H. But throw Samoa Joe into the mix into this match. Rollins and Joe, they're going to put on a heck of a match at Payback. And Seth Rollins has a lot of payback for Samoa Joe. In the second match that has implications for both the red brand and the blue brand, the WWE Championship will be defended in a House of Horrors match when Randy Orton defends his newly won championship against Bray Wyatt, another rematch from WrestleMania. Now, we do not know the full rules of a House of Horrors match. I sure know the rules of a Chamber of Horrors match, but not necessarily a House of Horrors. From what I heard on SmackDown, if I heard it correctly, the match starts in the House of Horrors, and then it will make its way to the ring. Now, we've seen matches like this before, going both ways, starting in the ring and having to end up in a particular area, like a Buried Alive match, or even the Arkansas Hog Pen match. And we've seen it start somewhere to make its way to the ring, like a Boiler Room Brawl, or, most famously, the Hollywood Backlot Brawl from WrestleMania 12, pardon me. Backlot Brawl, if you haven't seen it, look it up on the WWE Network. Roddy Piper and Goldust. That match, I think it was like the third match of the night or something, on a backlot, just beating the holy hell out of each other. And then it was great because then they, because the Hollywood, the match was, I guess, miles away in Hollywood. WrestleMania that year was in Anaheim. So if you live in California, you know the distance between Hollywood and Anaheim. But what happened is, so they started the match, and then Goldust got into his car, drove off. Piper got into his car, which he got into a white Ford Bronco. And if anyone's old enough to know the significance of a white Ford Bronco, especially in California, you'll know where I'm going with this. So then they cut back to the arena, more matches, and throughout the night, they kept filming. They had aerial view of Roddy Piper on his way to the pond in Anaheim, which looked very, very familiar of someone driving in a white Ford Bronco. Anyway, that match ended up in the ring. So, House of Horrors, I'm looking forward to it. I don't know if the House of Horrors will be like in the arena, in the back of the arena, or I really hope they don't think they're not going to make us think the House of Horrors starts in, with Sister Abigail's house in Louisiana, and then they're going to make their way back to San Jose to get in the ring. I'm not sure, but I'm looking forward to this House of Horrors. I enjoyed Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania. I wish Bray Wyatt would have held on to the title, but look, that's why we have transition champions. Actually, two transition champions. Now that I think about it, because Cena beat AJ Styles at the Royal Rumble, and then not even a month later, Bray Wyatt beat John Cena. Not even a month later, Randy Orton beat Bray Wyatt. They should have, me being me, just Styles versus Randy Orton would have been a great match at WrestleMania. But Styles versus Shane McMahon was a great match at WrestleMania. So, things happen for a reason, I guess. Now, again, with that, I'm going to assume, never really came out and said it, but I'm going to assume that if Bray Wyatt is on Raw, and the WWE Championship is ownership of SmackDown. So if Bray Wyatt wins the title, is he going back to SmackDown? Does the championship come to Raw? I guess we'll find out at Payback. And finally, Roman Reigns going one-on-one with Braun Strowman. Really not much needs to be said right there. They've had a match before on pay-per-view, and recently at Nassau Coliseum when Braun Strowman pretty much attempted to kill Roman Reigns on television. Really harken back to the late 80s and wonderful 90s of professional wrestling, when you can try and actually kill someone and just maybe get a slap on the wrist. So, Roman Reigns coming off actually legitly rough couple weeks, losing his brother Rosie from 3 Minute Warning, and he teamed with Hurricane Helms as a superhero in training. So, Roman was off TV anyway, and then the situation with his brother, so I guess there's going to be a lot going through Roman Reigns' head, both legitly and for the match. But Braun Strowman, man, he kind of came out of nowhere. I remember in the beginning, no one really, at least from what I could tell from the crowd, no one was really crazy about Braun. With the going up against all the scrubs. James Ellsworth was his first opponent, but look where Ellsworth is now. But Braun going through these scrubs, going through 2-on-1s, 3-on-1s with guys like a quarter of his size, and this undefeated monster is what Raw needs. And Braun Strowman really, really hit his stride. I really do not want to see Roman Reigns, and I do not think that Roman Reigns should win this match. Braun Strowman should come out on top, set him up to go one-on-one with Brock Lesnar, our part-time Universal Champion. So that's the card for Payback. Let's run through this real fast. Let's give my predictions, which if it's anything like WrestleMania, they will be very wrong. End Zone Cass versus Gallows and Anderson. Let's give it to Gallows and Anderson. Neville versus Aries. I feel like Aries is going to walk out with the championship. Bayley versus Alexa Bliss. As much as I would love to see Alexa Bliss win the title, I think Bayley's going to... well, wait a minute. Let me retract that. They are in Bayley's hometown of San Jose, and Vince really likes to give the hometown hero the big L, the loss on the record. So you know what? I'm going to go with Alexa Bliss, new Raw Women's Champion. Hardy Boys versus Sheamus and Cesaro. Kind of hoping the Hardys sign for a long time, so let's hope the Hardys retain the titles. KO versus Y2J. I feel like Kevin Owens will retain the United States Championship, and unfortunately, I think we may have seen the last of Chris Jericho for a while. Rollins versus Samoa Joe. I'm going to give that one... Oh, man. I'm going to give it to Rollins. Let's see what happens there. Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt. I think it's going to go without saying Randy Orton, because then Orton will go on to Backlash a few weeks later to take on Jinder Mahal for the WWE Championship. And Roman Reigns versus Braun Strowman. Like I said, I really, really hope Braun wins the title. Well, I hope he does eventually, but I think Braun should win that match against Roman Reigns. So we'll see how those predictions work out. I'm sure they won't, but we will take it from there. So I was watching last week I was watching Evolve Wrestling on flowslam.tv. If you haven't gotten flowslam.tv, you can get it on Apple TV and Roku. It's a pretty cool you can also get it on the internet. It's a pretty cool, I guess, platform for WWN Live. If you watch WWN Live Wrestling, Evolve, Full Impact Pro, Shine, I think Shimmer's part of them. It's well worth it. You can do like monthly or yearly, and you get all these shows, House of Hardcore. You get all these shows as part of the package, so you're not paying individual for the shows, for the internet pay-per-views. But I was watching Evolve. It was an I Quit match. All Ego, Ethan Page taking on Darby Allen. And now these are two, I'm not going to say local. They're not local because Evolve is getting there. They're evolving, no pun intended. Drew McIntyre just came from Evolve. But Ethan Page and Darby Allen are two up-and-comers, especially Ethan Page. I really feel Ethan Page will be moving on to NXT very, very soon. YouTube these two. And if you can, YouTube the match. I don't know if it's on YouTube. But Ethan Page, Darby Allen. So basically it was an I Quit match. And no, I'm sorry, Last Man Standing match. Forgive me. It was a Last Man Standing match. And as the indies, or really anyone other than WWE, would do, they really go all out. You know, the blood, they up the violence just a notch. I mean, they were in La Boom in Queens, New York, so they really didn't have that much room to work with. But Ethan Page came out with a shovel. I missed the prior Evolve, so it looked like they were doing a gimmick with a body bag, which eventually Darby Allen was shoved into the body bag, in which Ethan Page, before completely zipping up the body bag, threw a bunch of thumbtacks into the body bag and then proceeded to powerbomb Darby Allen in the tack-filled body bag. So, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Real quick, on a side note, again, it must have been an earlier Evolve show, but there's a clip online, I saw it on Facebook, I think, where it was the same two, Ethan Page and Darby Allen, and Ethan picked up Darby Allen and threw him out of the ring, kind of like when Bam Bam Bigelow threw Spike Dudley out of the ring into the fourth row in ECW. Ethan Page did the same thing, but it looked like it must have been at the ECW arena maybe, or something like it, because there was a giant pillar right next to the ring, and he tossed Darby Allen right into that pillar, and this guy hit hard. This Darby Allen almost seems like he may be trying to go the path of, and I mean this by no disrespect whatsoever, none whatsoever, but the path of Mick Foley, Sabu, these guys who do the hardcore. He's not slicing and dicing himself, but he's just going a little bit further than anyone else would. So anyway, going back to the I keep calling it an I Quit match, the Last Man Standing match. At one point, Page hits Allen with a shovel, and the shovel got Allen right in the elbow, the side of the elbow. From what I understood, dug straight into the bone of the arm, because he was bleeding pretty well during the match. And they didn't necessarily stop it, but the new thing now in a lot of these groups is, well, WWE does it, well, they will really pretty much stop the match. But the referee kind of halted the match for a moment to just put some sort of gauze or to stop the bleeding on Darby Allen. It was funny because I think the two wrestlers didn't want, once you're in that zone, you don't want to stop. And this is what I'm going to talk about in a few moments. But Allen just kind of, really for the rest of the match, he was just holding on to his arm and just keeping that gauze on the wounds. They sent him to the hospital, obviously, after the match was over. But this is kind of what I want to get at, because I hear people from both sides. I grew up in the Attitude Era of wrestling. That's a lie. 80s wrestling, 90s wrestling, early 2000s. Those are all different eras. But with the early 2000s is when I remember, late 90s, early 2000s, when I remember discovering these death matches from Japan and even here in the U.S., using thumbtacks, using barbed wire, later on glass, light tubes. And I will be the first to admit I was all in with that stuff. I mean, Combat Zone Wrestling is the number one place that I can think of that really incorporated all of this ultra violence. Over in Japan had a lot of it. FMW did a lot of the exploding steel cage matches, the electrified steel cage matches, the exploding barbed wire matches, the infamous death match tournament, which actually was in 94, so really mid-90s, that had the finals, Cactus Jack and Terry Funk, and just that iconic picture of Foley, Cactus Jack, wearing the crimson mask. I mean, face just covered in blood. C4 explosions. I mean, you can see, if you want to use the F word or wrestling. I hate using the F word in wrestling, but you can't use it in this match. You can see the burnt skin off of Cactus Jack. And I say all this, and it was a tremendous match. For what it's worth, it was a tremendous match. It wasn't violence for the sake of violence. Cactus Jack and Terry Funk put on a match with the tools at hand. Fast forward a few years, though, this is where I have a little bit of a problem with Combat Zone Wrestling, where theirs is violence for the sake of violence. Now, keep in mind, Dean Ambrose he's a former CZW champion, John Moxley, and he was in these Combat Zone Wrestling every year has a tournament of death, and it gets wackier and wackier. Look it up on YouTube. Dean Ambrose was the recipient of the skill saw. You heard me right, skill saw. Well, more specifically, a what do you call that? A sawzall to the forehead. So, so the guys from Combat Zone have made their way into WWE, but their violence for the sake of violence. Like, I remember first watching them, and they were big with the light tubes, the fluorescent long light tubes, just bashing each other over the head, over the back. I remember guys like Sick Nick Mondo, John Zandig, the Wife Beater. That's a wrestler's name. I'm not accusing anyone. That is a wrestler's name. These guys were just ultra violent. Wife Beater used to bring in I'm starting to, not a hedge clipper, but I guess a hedge clipper. A motorized hedge clipper, and I would just whack guys. I mean, on their back. I've seen it on the chest. You see blood flying. Basically, what I'm getting at is, as much as the bloodlust was there with ECW, it really, nowadays it really panned off and really fell off, I think, in a good way now. But to the point now that with all these stoppages that WWE does, once someone starts bleeding, a lot of people always complain, why they stopping. UFC doesn't really stop. They keep going. The refs are now putting gloves on, and 9 times out of 10, the gloves never fit. The gloves are always like 2 sizes too big for the referees. Whereas back in the 90s, they would let him go. I mean, JBL versus Eddie Guerrero at the Great American Bash. Was it Great American Bash or was it Judgment Day? It was their match before JBL won the title, and that was at Great American Bash. But bottom line, Eddie's the mat was pretty much covered completely red, and that was all Eddie. That was all Eddie Guerrero. He dug too deep, hit a vein on his forehead, but he kept going for like another 6 or 7 minutes during the match. Most recently, I can think of, Brock Lesnar got busted open, and he threw the doctor, I think, out of the ring. It was Hell in a Cell against The Undertaker. Samoa Joe at NXT TakeOver Dallas last year against Finn Balor very early in the match. Got busted open, and they kept stopping or slowing down the match. Blood can tell a story, and I think when used properly, once in a while, blood can really heighten a match. But I get it as to why they stop, and I get as to why they really don't blade anymore, or at least on the big leagues. It's 2017. I'm actually paraphrasing something that Jim Ross said. I actually got this. I heard it from Jim Ross on a podcast. I think it was one of his podcasts early on. 2017, nowadays, you just, for safety of both the wrestlers and of the fans, diseases nowadays gets transmitted very quickly, very easily. There's new diseases now than there were back then. You want to have everyone's safety in mind. And with that, that's where I can understand the lack of bloodshed now in wrestling, especially in WWE. ROH still does it. Like I said, the indies still do it. TNA for a while was doing it excessively just because they could or something. I heard that. There's also too much with the violence. When I say violence, I mean the blood, because wrestling is a violent sport to begin with. But I'm talking about like the blood. And as much as I love to see it back when used properly, like in a cage match or in Hell in a Cell, I get why they don't purposely do it. And I think some people, as much as they miss that blood and guts of the 90s and 2000s, I think if you actually sit down and you think about it and you think to yourself, all right, this is for everyone's safety, because, how many times, especially on the indies, maybe guys getting tested for anything, and I'm talking legit. I'm not trying to stir up anything. I was at a match that, it was a dog collar match, and they both got blood, or as they call it, color, and I was sitting front row, and I got the blood on my hands, I got the blood on my shoes, and don't get me wrong, I was going nuts. I loved it. I was cheering. I wanted more. I think back on it, though, I'm like, I don't really know these people. And, they probably just thought about this just a couple minutes before the match. So maybe it wasn't the best to necessarily have the blood on me and not necessarily immediately wipe it off because I'm too busy watching the match. So for those looking for that, for the bloodlust of professional wrestling, with everything, we all evolve. The company, the business, I should say, evolves as well, and maybe one day we'll get back to that, because wrestling's very cyclical, peaks and valleys, especially with popularity. But definitely, I am past the blood and guts era of pro wrestling. Even with stuff like Combat Zones, only so many times you can see someone get bashed through a pane of glass, through barbed wire, through fire, onto a bed of thumbtacks, and think, that's interesting. So, but if you want to watch it, if you want to see what I'm talking about, just look up Japanese death matches. Look up Combat Zone Wrestling, CZW, Tournament and Death. There's some interesting stuff that you will see, and definitely viewer discretion is advised. So, that's my 2 cents. It's going to be a popular topic, probably not. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of people who are going to disagree with me on that one. But hey, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm in this seat. And that's why I'm giving you my opinion. If you ever want to get back to me and, you want to, you have some thoughts yourself, you can tweet me at More365, MOHR365. That is me. Pretty much every social media. Follow me there. I'll be more than happy to address your questions. And even if you have any topic suggestions, anything you want me to talk about, put it up right there. And I'll be on a future episode. I would be more than happy to discuss. And I'm looking forward to the pay-per-view on Sunday. Actually, right after that, let me look at the calendar, because April 30th, May 12th, let me check my ticket, because Ring of Honor has a pay-per-view coming up in New York City at their Hammerstein Ballroom, and sure as shoots, I will be there. May 12th, Ring of Honor, War of the Worlds. We'll talk about that next week. Hey, if you see me there, say hi, because I will be at War of the Worlds pay-per-view. So we'll talk about that next week, and we'll see what happens on Raw, on SmackDown. We'll talk Ring of Honor leading up to the pay-per-view. As far as I know right now, Cody Rhodes, it will be a triple threat match in the main event for the ROH World Championship. Obviously, Christopher Daniels is going to be part of it, and the American Nightmare, Cody, is going to be in that match as well. I'm not sure who the third one is. It may have been announced, but I didn't check it yet, but we'll talk about that next time. In the meantime, though, thank you very much for joining. Truly, this road, this endeavor I'm on, it's going to get bigger and better. Trust me, stick with me. Things are just looking up from here. And if you like what I have to say, or if you want to support me, I also have another podcast, The Retro Gamers. Myself and Anthony talk all things retro. That drops every Tuesday. This bad boy, the Pro Slam World Podcast, drops every Friday. And with The Retro Gamers, I'm just going to put out a cheap plug here. This is the cheap plug moment of the week. We got some plans coming up in the summer for the Retro Gamers, as far as broadcasting, working with some people with retro gaming, expos. Myself and Anthony will be reporting from, so definitely check out the Retro Gamers, and they're at facebook.com. Let me try that again. Take two. Facebook.com/Retro Gamers Podcast. So please definitely check us out, and share all these podcasts, please, because without your support, I'm just talking to dead air, and hopefully I'm not doing that. So I'll catch you all next week. Enjoy This Week in Wrestling. Enjoy Payback, and see you on the flip side.